Goal for Shedeur Sanders over the next 5 games. Give the Browns something to think about this offseason. We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast. I'm proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Shedeur Sanders' goal for the rest of the season is simple. Give the Browns something to think about this offseason. There's one change that's inevitably going to have to be made when the season concludes. And in a losing season, the Browns lose a key player for the rest of the year in Malik Collins. We'll talk about what it means for the Browns defense. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making this your first listen every single day. Remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. The goal for Shedeur Sanders from here on out, the rest of this season, is easy. You got to give the Browns something to think about this offseason. And what I mean by that is, we know this Browns team has searched high and low for decades for a franchise quarterback. We know that they're going to be positioned in the draft order to potentially draft another quarterback this upcoming spring, this upcoming April, if they so choose, depending on where they land in that draft order. That is always so highly coveted, and we'll see what this class obviously looks like, who actually comes out, who stays, all those different things. But we know that that's at least an option on the table for them as we start inching closer and closer to offseason mode and offseason conversations and quarterback conversations and all those different things. So with all that in mind, Shedeur Sanders' main goal the rest of the way is to simply give the Browns something to consider and think about and make that decision less clear than maybe it's been for a lot of this year. Like I think for a lot of this season, the assumption has just been, oh, well, they're going to draft a quarterback in the first round next year, or draft another quarterback in general that they maybe think even more highly of than they do of the two they currently have, and see if they can turn one of those guys into their franchise quarterback. And that's obviously assuming as well that this regime is still in place, which we'll see. But in the grand scheme of things, that's been the prevailing thought. Shedeur's goal is to make them rethink that. Give them another option. Play so well that when they get to the end of the season, they have to think and consider, do we need to draft a quarterback, or do we have something viable here in Shedeur Sanders that we think we can lean into and try to build around this offseason instead of have to find another quarterback? And doing that would be, if Shedeur gives them something to think about, at the very least, that's a huge win for him, for the franchise, all that stuff. Because it means that you might have your answer in the room, or you might feel like you have something to build on already in the room, and you don't have to, go all in on drafting one in the first round and hoping that you hit on the right talent. You can essentially use those picks on other needs, which, as we know, this team has a lot of those, especially on the offensive side of the football, where, as we talked about on our post-game show on Sunday, you have an offensive line that's probably going to be completely remade this offseason. Wyatt Teller's rotating at right guard now. There's not a lock that he's going to be back. Ethan Posick, final year of his deal. Joe Bitonio might retire. Jack Conklin, last year of his deal. This whole group's going to probably be remade. Any hopes that they might keep somebody around, I think, are slowly dissipating with each passing game, because, again, if you're seeing now Wyatt Teller, who I would think is the guy you'd, even as recently as a couple of years ago, you'd want to keep around as kind of like a stalwart of the line in general, sort of a veteran of that group who's played at a high level before in his career. If that disappears, if he's no longer playing at that level, you're not going to invest in him. And so it's going to come down to, how do you rebuild this thing? Through free agency, through trades, through the draft, whatever. And so if you now have, instead of having to use a first-round pick on a quarterback, because you think, you know what, let's see what we have in Shedeur Sanders. Let's see if there's something viable here based on what we've seen through these last, what would end up being a grand total of, I guess, 7 games for him. Let's see what it looks like. Let's see what he brings to the table. Let's see if he gives you something to consider, then maybe you can instead prioritize using those 2 first-round picks that you have, your own and the Jaguars, on building the roster up around Shedeur Sanders, building the roster in other areas, adding a wide receiver, adding an offensive lineman, adding other position groups if you so choose. I think that kind of makes like that. That's a good problem to have. If you have, if you're going into the offseason feeling like we don't know that we need to draft a quarterback because we think we might have somebody viable there, then and you can use those picks on other players. That's a good thing. That's a positive thing for the Cleveland Browns. So we'll see how that all kind of comes together. We'll see what all that looks like when the time comes over the course of these next several games. We know Shedeur Sanders is starting this week against the Titans. Kevin Stefanski would not elaborate beyond this week as to whether or not he's going to start Shedeur moving forward after this game, if he's taking it like a week-to-week approach, which is what he kind of originally said when he named Shedeur Sanders the starter. But my hope is that he keeps playing well enough and you keep seeing enough from the offense that's intriguing and positive steps and feeling like there's a little more juice with him than Dylan Gabriel or others, that he can keep the job the rest of the season, and that over the course of these next 5 games that remain, you get to the end of the season, you can sit there and say, maybe there is something here. Maybe Shedeur has played well enough to make the Browns reconsider their stance or their feelings on their quarterback situation and feel like maybe they have something that they want to keep seeing develop before just pivoting to another rookie quarterback that they draft in April. That's the goal for Shedeur Sanders. I think there's a chance he could pull it off. I know that yesterday there were still some negative things, but there was also some positive things. And I said it after the show or after the game on the post-game show, like if you can't see that the offense just looks better with him operating things, then I don't know if we're watching the same games and the same tape, because to me the offense looks like it has a different energy about it. To me the offense looks like it just has a little extra juice. They seem to play harder around Shedeur Sanders, and there's a little bit more to this offense in terms of the deep shots that you can take. I know he missed one to Jerry Jeudy. That's something he can correct, right? There's always areas to grow and improve, especially as a young rookie player like he is. But if he can get to the end of the season and he keeps making those progressions, and the offense continues to look like there's something there, and that they're on the brink of something, it might convince the Browns just enough, and those in charge, that they can maybe just stick with him at the start of next season and use those picks on other places on the roster. And if he walks away giving the Browns that choice, or giving the Browns forcing the Browns to have that conversation, I think that's a win in his book. I think that's a win for the Browns, because it means that you might have struck gold. You might have found something in one of these quarterbacks that you took, and that's why you take the bites at the apple in the first place. Now, this is also sort of assuming that this regime is back, because let's be honest, if this regime isn't back, all bets are off at that point. We know how these new coaches and GMs operate. They want their own guys, and they especially want their own quarterback. So there's no guarantee that Shedeur would even still be here after going into 2026 if they clean house, fire guys, bring in a new coach and GM, for sure. But if this staff is still here, you give them something to think about, and you make it as difficult as possible for them to just decide they're going to draft a quarterback next year. And that's a good place, I think, in the long run to be, if you feel like you at least have an option or a potential option there at that position, and you maybe found the quarterback that you're looking for. But it takes him getting better and playing well each week. And if he can finish out the season, these last 5 games, and get the 7 starts under his belt, and you see him getting developing in real time, I think there's a world where that becomes a legitimate conversation this offseason. The Browns have to have it. Speaking of, moving away from Shedeur Sanders and the offense, special teams continues to plague the Browns, and it's why there's one change that is inevitable this offseason, even if the big figures on this staff are still here. We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is always the hardest part. That's why Gametime is clutch. It gives fans the real advantages when it comes to snagging seats. With Gametime, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. The seat viewfinder is a game changer. You can literally see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat when you buy price Prices include fees up front as well, which I personally love. There's no last-second surprises when you go to check out. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, and event in between. With Gametime, download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And again, download the app, make an account. It's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go Gametime today. All right, so one thing I can say definitively is going to be changing this offseason. Whether Stefanski and Barry are still here or not, it's going to be they're going to have to make a change to their special teams coordinator if they're both still here. That's first and foremost. But honestly, like the special teams blunders might be one of the biggest reasons why everybody ends up getting fired at the end of the season, because it's the same problems persisting. It's the same things happening over and over again. And it's just the mental miscues that are happening on those plays in particular that are becoming inexcusable. And it's a coaching thing from top down. Yes, Bubba Ventrone is the special teams coordinator, but Kevin Stefanski is the one who stands there post-game and says, I got to be better. We got to fix these things. We got to be better in these areas. But then the things aren't getting corrected. Or you fix one thing and then you spring a leak somewhere else. That's what special teams has been all year. It's been giving up long kick returns, giving up long punt returns, which you saw a long punt return in that game on Sunday against the 49ers. But then it was a muff punt, which, listen, muff punts happen. I get that. That one's a little more forgivable in that, like, it's a more common thing. Sometimes guys just drop the ball. I don't think we have to rip on Gage Larvidan for that. But obviously you don't want to see that miscue, and it cost the team in the end. And then there's the egregious one of Malik Collins toe tapping along the sideline instead of putting 1 foot on the sideline and 1 foot in bounds to draw the kickoff going out of bounds penalty and getting the ball in better field position. You put yourself at the 5 instead. Like, those are just mental lapses that cannot happen, and it's been an ongoing thing with the special teams units this year, even dating back to last year to a degree. Like, the problems persist. And, like, I'm not even saying they got to be, like, the elite of the elite on special teams here. But, like, the special teams has cost the Browns now at least 2 games. And you could argue 3. Really, it is 3. Because, like, the Jets game, it could have cost you that game yesterday. If you don't muff the punt, maybe you get a chance to score and that game ends up different. I don't know. But then also you can go back to week 1 where a missed field goal cost you a game against your division rival, the Cincinnati Bengals. So, they fixed, and that's what I mean. Like, when they fix something else, another leak springs. They fix the kicking problem. I mean, Andre Schmidt, I've barely said his name on this podcast since week 2 of the season, week 3 of the season. Like, he has been steady and consistent, and he's made his kicks, and that's not an issue anymore. It's probably the most consistent part of, ironically, after the way the season started, it's probably the most consistent part of the special teams units to this point is their kicking game, or their field goal and PAT game with Andre Schmidt. But it's everything else that has just become problematic. And like I said, if it's not one thing, it's another. And I don't know, like, what's not getting through to guys. But when you're having mental lapses and miscues like the Browns are having, those things fall in coaching. And that, again, starts at the top and works its way down. It's Bubba Ventrone, yes, but it's also Kevin Stefanski. And so I think without question, like, we've seen off seasons where this organization and this regime specifically has changed coaches. They changed offensive coordinators from Alex Van Pelt a couple years ago to Ken Dorsey last year. That didn't work out. They changed it again. They promoted Tommy Rees, and they've also obviously changed defensive coordinators. They had Joe Woods, then they hired Jim Schwartz. So they've changed out all the different coordinator positions except for special teams. And they changed out special teams, early on in Kevin Stefanski's tenure as well, from Mike Prefer to Bubba Ventrone. So they've changed out all these coaches at different points throughout Kevin Stefanski's tenure. And it might be the one card that he can play this offseason of like, all right, well, we need to get our special teams cleaned up and better, so let's make this change. I think that would probably happen because here's the thing. As much as Jimmy Haslam may just accept what he seems to have accepted every time a microphone gets put in his face and he's asked about the future of these guys, that, it was always going to take time to rebuild this thing, and he's not going to hold it against them, and they always expected this year to kind of be a rebuild, however you want to frame it. And again, that's been his sort of similar message he said at numerous points this year. If that's his thought process and he decides to stick it out with these guys, I do think someone has to pay the price. I do think somebody is going to get the brunt of a losing season. Like, I don't know how you just run it back with everything the same and expect different results again. And the reasoning behind it is simply, well, hey, we kind of expected this year was going to be bad. Like, no, there's certain things that are inexcusable, and someone's going to have to sort of pay for that. So if it ends up being, hey, we're going to stick with the main guys here, Stefanski, Barry, you guys get to stay and see this thing through, I do think a change at special teams coordinator will be coming on the other end of this, on the other side of the season. I just feel like it has to happen. But honestly, like I said, the miscues on special teams that have persisted this season, combined with, as I highlighted in the postgame show Sunday, some of the costly decision making on fourth down calls and trying to go for it and failing from your own 33, and then that costing you a game. All these things compounding might just mean everybody gets fired anyway. But I do feel like if this regime gets to stay, if they get to stick around, at the very least, I think Bubba Ventrone is very much on the chopping block as somebody who probably has to sort of be the sacrificial lamb for a bad season because the special teams have just continued to be a problem for this team. I hate that for Bubba because I do believe in my heart of hearts that Bubba is a really good football coach, that he cares about his players passionately and wants to and tries his damnedest to put them in the best position to be successful. I think he coaches them hard. I do. Like, he gives off that type of mentality, and I've had great interactions with Bubba over the last couple of years. I respect him. And he's a great person from all I can gather. But the results aren't there. And I honestly think, especially Bubba being sort of a Belichick tree disciple, I think Bubba understands that more than anybody, that when the results aren't there, these types of things are always a possibility. Like, your job is always on the line, and not that he'd be happy about it or willing to necessarily accept it, but I think he would understand that when the group that you're in charge of is struggling, there's sometimes nowhere else to point the finger. That's how the nature of the business is, and that's just how it works. So I feel for Bubba because I thought when they made that hire, it was going to work wonders for the special teams. I think that first year after Mike Prefer and with Bubba at the helm, it was better, and you thought they'd just make steady progress, but it's regressed, and it's a problem. So I can almost guarantee you that at least that change will be coming in the offseason. I don't think it does you any good to do it now. What's the point? You could have done it mid-season. You could have done it at the bye week if you really were going to do a mid-season thing. I think the Hasms has sort of continued to say they've learned their lesson about that, and that's not necessarily their MO anymore. So that's not how they're going to operate, and that's fine. I don't know what the point would be at this point to do it now anyway. But I do think, like, by season's end, someone's going to lose a job. And I think at the top of that list, if the Hasms are inclined to keep Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Bayer around, I think it's probably Bubba Ventrone that's most likely to be moved on from, because the special teams issues just, and it stinks too, because like last week you had a good special teams play and it felt like, oh, here we go. They're rebounding. And it's like every time they take a step forward, they take two steps back the next week. And that's what's so infuriating about it, is they just cannot play consistently enough. And at the end of the day, like, someone's got to answer for that, and the special teams coordinator would be the first person to have to feel that blame. So we'll see how it shakes out the rest of the way. But I do think that that's a change that is almost inevitable when the season comes to a close here, even if other people remain in their current positions within this staff and within this regime. Brutal injury news for the Browns on Monday as Malik Collins' season is over. How big of a blow is this to the Browns defense and defensive line? What does it mean for the defense moving forward? We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports, bowl games, big basketball matchups, and playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while we're making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections. Lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. Creating a lineup takes less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. And the new Stacks feature lets you choose the same player up to 3 times in one lineup, like more on a quarterback's passing yards, touchdowns, and rushing yards. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves your lineup from a loss. I wish regular fantasy apps had that feature. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. So we did get the unfortunate news on Monday as Kevin Stefanski revealed that Malik Collins is officially done for the season. It's a quad injury. So I think on that front, as the silver lining in this is that when you watch the replay of the play that he got hurt on, he goes down to the ground and he's kind of grasping towards his knee. And so I think the initial fear, especially when the cart comes out, was, oh no, like this could be a non-contact knee injury, torn ACL, that type of thing. And it might be detrimental, especially for a guy who's 30 in terms of his career. But it's not that. It was a quad injury. I'm assuming some sort of tear where he has to have surgery. So it's going to have to probably be reattached in some capacity, and we'll see what all that sort of rehab situation looks like. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to pretend to know like what the recovery process is like in terms of coming back from an injury like that. But I feel like it's less ominous in that this is going to be something that totally derails the rest of his career. He is under contract with the Browns for 2026. He signed a 2-year deal in the offseason. So expected to be back with the Browns next year and still be part of this dominant defensive line that they obviously assembled this season. But, you hope he can still be as effective. Again, I don't know what the recovery is like. I don't know what the sort of comeback rate is on these types of things. But, you're hopeful that this doesn't have to be a blow to his career and how much more time he wants to sort of play in the NFL. But we'll see, obviously, how that shakes out. In the grand scheme of things, though, not as severe as an injury as it could have been, but still going to cost him the rest of the season. And that's where this is super unfortunate for, obviously, Malik first and foremost, but the Browns and this organization as a whole, because Malik Collins has been phenomenal. He has been one of the best defensive tackles this season in terms of pass rush win rate per PFF. Like, he gets after the quarterback. That spin move he has is otherworldly, like incredible stuff. He's been so effective from the interior of this defense, and he's part of the reason why, like, I tried, by the way, to talk everywhere I could. I was screaming from the mountaintops that the Malik Collins signing was like one of the most underrated moves of the entire offseason for the Browns, but even just across the NFL, because that dude was good. That dude was good last year for the 49ers, and I felt like adding him to this defensive line with Myles Garrett, and then you draft Mason Graham, and you got the rotation of Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire. Like, I was like, this defensive line is going to be good. And he was a big reason for that. You finally had somebody who could generate pressure from the interior with Myles, in sort of a supporting role. And it paid off incredibly. He had his career high in sacks this season, 6.5 of them. So that speaks to how dominant he's been. It's helped with Mason sort of in the middle of that group as well. But man, like, what a season he was having. He played such a prominent role on this team and on this defense and on that defensive line. And Kevin alluded to that on his Zoom conference on Monday, the idea that he's been an important leader. He's an voice in that locker room, but he's also just been, from a play standpoint, such an important piece of that defense. And you go right up the middle of the defense. I mean, Malik Collins, you go to the linebacker room, you got Carson Schlesinger, you go to the secondary, you have Grant Delpit. Like, that trio just right up the middle of this defense has been so crucial to the success that side of the ball has had on the field this season. And so it's a tough one. It's a tough player to lose. I don't listen, this Browns defense is so good. They have so many players. They fly around and make plays constantly that I don't know. And plus, like, at some point you're getting Alex Wright back here in the near future, it seems. So, I think, like, you lose a guy in the middle, but you still kind of have, you're getting some reinforcements on the outside. Mike Hall you're sort of the next man up there in that interior spot. Like, let's see what he can kind of do here in some longer time out on the field as more of in more maybe a starting role, if you will. Shelby Harris is going to get more looks, I'm sure. And Kevin talked about that as well, like the idea that it takes it takes multiple people to sort of try to fill that role, but you're never going to fully replace Malik Collins, who's been tremendous this season. But they'll sort of bank on those guys. The nice thing is, defensive line is one of, if not their deepest position group on this football team. So I don't know that like it's a blow, but I'm hopeful that they can still remain consistent and solid and firm up front because of the depth that they have accumulated at those positions, and that they can still sort of hold their own. But yes, losing Malik stinks because not only because he's been having a great season, but because it is a loss for this defense. And again, that middle of the defense, those three guys I named, like they all kind of play in sync and off of each other. Malik is able to make plays that stop the run that allows Carson Schwarzenegger to go out or disrupts things that allows Carson Schwarzenegger to get free to go. He occupies guys that then allow Carson Schwarzenegger to go cover a guy. He might occupy enough guys that like it helps Grant Delpit be able to see a clear picture so that he can fly up and make a play in the run game. Like there's so many just small ripples that having Malik Collins in the middle of that defensive line and causing problems sort of triggers down the line in the back levels in the middle and the back level of the defense that you're going to sort of miss here. But they'll see if they can replace him to the best of their ability with some of these other guys that are sort of waiting in the wings behind them, and that'll obviously be getting more reps here over the final 5 games of the season. But I hated this news. I did. I was hopeful that when Kevin Stefanski said it was a quad injury on during his post-game press conference on Sunday, I was hopeful that it wouldn't be of the level or severity that he'd be out for the rest of the season, but it came to fruition that way. Again, the cart is always like a kiss of death, if you will, for a player, knowing that they're probably in some trouble in terms of their season being lost, and that was the case in this one too. I feel for Malik. It was so fun to watch him. I enjoyed being sort of the champion of the conductor of his hype train back in the offseason and feeling like not enough people were talking about that addition. And it paid off and was exactly what I anticipated it would be. He's been brilliant, and it stinks that his season has to come to an end this way as we're talking about Miles closing in on the sack record for a single season and the contributions made around him from other guys in the career season that he was having. It all just stinks. And in a losing season, it's another, not in the win or loss column loss, not on the record loss, but it's another loss that just you feel. And it hurts. It hurts because he was a bright spot on this team just in general and on a defense that's been really the positive and good thing to talk about this year as far as the Cleveland Browns are concerned. That's another episode Down with You, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. And I always like to tell you, if you like what you heard, hit that subscribe button. Make Locked On Browns your first listen every day wherever you get your podcasts. And at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the #1 sports podcast network. Subscribe today. You can also find Locked On NFL twice a day. Tyler, Roland, Tony Wiggins, got you covered there. Find it where you get your podcast and the Locked On NFL YouTube channel. And keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you on Tuesday with Lance Reisland breaking down the tape. We'll do it for you then. See you, Cleveland.